The US dollar, one of the most powerful currencies on earth, has suddenly collapsed. Overnight, stores are shuttered, ATMs are empty, and your life savings is completely worthless. The dollar isn't just America's currency, it's the backbone of global trade. If it crashes, the effects won't stop at US borders. They will ripple across the entire planet. But would this lead to chaos in the streets or a slow economic unraveling? Would other countries bail the US out or take advantage of the collapse? We'll reveal the fallout on today's episode of the Infographics Show. What if the dollar crashed overnight, hour by hour? Hour 1. As his alarm goes off, Jeff doesn't realize that the world he's waking up to isn't the one he remembers. It's not even the same one he fell asleep in the night before. He checks his phone and is greeted by a slew of missed calls, urgent messages from friends and family. Mixed along with them are breaking news alerts. His brain is still in the process of rebooting after a long night. Then he reads a headline that sums it all up. US dollar crashes, value plummets overnight in record-breaking collapse. Immediately, Jeff is out of bed, hurriedly rushing to his computer, booting it up to check his bank account online. He logs in, albeit slowly, as the site is much slower than usual thanks to the sheer volume of other people also trying to log in and view the state of their money. But he manages to get through and he sees his balance. It's exactly as he left it, a modest figure with some savings set aside, barely a cent out of place. Jeff refreshes the tab, waiting anxiously for it to load into his account a second time. But once again, it works and he is greeted by the same numbers. The only difference is, now they're just that, numbers on a screen, with no meaning or value. That money in Jeff's account is literally worthless. He tries to call the bank, the line rings, then an automated voice thanks Jeff for his call. It assures him that while his query is important, the bank is experiencing a higher volume of calls than usual, and places him in the queue. There's hundreds of other callers pushing and jostling to try to get to speak with any bank employee who might pick up the call and answer all of their questions. Pacing back and forth, Jeff turns on the TV, switching the channel over to the news. The coverage of what's happening makes it look like something out of a dystopian movie. Grocery stores are packed with shoppers. Shelves have been stripped of products as people jostle and tussle with each other, some even starting full-blown fistfights over goods. But nobody can buy anything. Their money, after all, has zero value. Across the United States, stores are being looted by opportunists. All manner of chaos ensuing as people struggle to process this new reality. Gas stations are preventing cars from entering and filling up at the pumps unless the drivers can fork over something valuable in exchange for fuel. It's a nightmare. Jeff opens up his wallet and takes a look at a few loose notes on hand. A crumpled 20, a few 10s, it's barely $100 in total. Panic quickly sets in, and he feels an intense tightening in his chest. Hour 2. Jerry is an economist, and he's one of many who have been woken up early with a seemingly impossible task: fixing the mess. There's a lot of urgency, verging on total panic, but Jerry is at least brushed up on his economic history, enough to know that there is a precedent for this. Not a good one, mind you. It's not the first time in human history that a country's currency has collapsed. During the 1920s, Germany saw the value of their currency drop so low that citizens were forced to use stacks of cash as kindling for fires in order to heat their homes. The money was literally worth less than firewood. Hyperinflation in Venezuela had such severe effects that the prices of simple everyday purchases like coffee doubled every 18 days. And at the height of the financial crisis in Zimbabwe, the country's government printed a $1 trillion bill to try to boost their economy. And those couldn't even match the price of a loaf of bread. Though the main difference between those examples and this one is, this time it's not just one country affected. The fallout of the collapse of the dollar could be felt across the entire globe. The US dollar has long been considered the reserve currency for the whole world. To put it simply, if you were in any country in the world and offered a local resident a $100 bill, they're pretty likely to take it. They're likely able to exchange it for a pretty decent amount of their own native currency, especially if it's one that the US dollar has a positive value against. It's widely trusted that the dollar will retain a level of value, and that means that it can be used by a holder to pay for goods and services, and be exchanged for local currencies by recipients. The same can't be said for most other currencies in the world. For example, the Venezuelan bolivar is far less likely to carry that same level of trust that the dollar has internationally. A huge part of the reason the United States dollar has retained so much trust as an international reserve currency is largely because it's never been canceled. For the citizens of many countries around the world, it's not uncommon to one day wake up and find the value of your local currency has dropped dramatically. Plenty of currencies have also been devalued over the last decade. There's the Turkish lira, the Argentine peso, pounds from Syria, Egypt, and Lebanon, the Iranian rial, and of course the aforementioned Venezuelan bolivar. Since the end of the Second World War, though, the dollar has avoided the fate of these other currencies, becoming the most widely used currency, especially for international trade. Back then, the value of the dollar was backed by the US government with gold. Using what was known as the Bretton Woods system, the gold was valued at around $35 per ounce. Having a stable value affixed to the dollar meant that the demand for US dollars increased. Even after the Bretton Woods system collapsed in 1971, the dollar remained trusted as the world's reserve currency. And ever since, there's not really been a viable alternative to it, which is why it's seen such continued widespread use into the modern day. It's been the stable foundation underneath global trade, economic expansion, and investment. And 2 hours ago, that foundation was the rug that just got pulled out from underneath almost every major industry in the world. So the likes of Jerry and his economist buddies are left trying to catch as many of the falling pieces of the tumbling structure that is collapsing on top of their heads, while also trying to determine just what can even be done about this whole situation. Needless to say, things have been looking dire from the second the dollar's value dropped to zero. Jerry's gonna have a heck of a time trying to figure out some way to get back on track, providing society hasn't collapsed entirely by lunchtime. Does anyone still get a lunch break if the money they're working to earn is worthless? Do they even bother showing up for work? Can any society even function normally during a crisis like this? Well, that's what someone else is trying to ensure. Hour 3. A gaggle of suited men and women rush through narrow corridors, hallways only ever seen by state officials and government insiders. Everyone is rushing to be somewhere, to hand some document to someone else, who will inevitably bring it before the state governor, Governor Jed. As the leader of the state's government executive branch, everyone from city mayors to average constituents are all looking to Jed for answers, and he doesn't have any of them. All Jed can focus on is maintaining order. Meanwhile, the state senator and other representatives higher up the governmental ladder can try to figure out how to move forward. Jed gets his assistants to draft up a statement to the public, assuring his constituents that the government, at both the state and federal levels, are trying to solve this crisis as quickly as they can. The US dollar isn't immune to collapsing, and it's likely that a number of factors have caused its value to drop. In a world after the 2019 COVID pandemic, the national debt of the United States has been under intense strain. As of April 2025, the US national debt has soared past $31 trillion, and it's still climbing. The COVID-19 pandemic only made things worse as the government pumped trillions into stimulus packages and emergency spending. The impact of this, combined with the liability of worsening national debt, could have been just two of the factors that contributed to the devastating decline of the dollar's value. Add to that the rise in interest rates, which, if they continue to rise, could make it more expensive for the US to borrow money from other countries. This would either lead to a default on their debt or force the US government to cut its spending. In either case, this would have a negative impact on the economy as a result. The same can be said for inflation, which has been consistently growing, and the higher it gets, the more it erodes the value of the dollar, making it less trustworthy as the world's reserve currency. If enough countries and international trade and economic partnerships like BRICS, which includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Egypt, and Ethiopia, among others, were to reject the dollar for another currency, then this could be what causes the dollar itself to collapse. At any rate, that's already come to pass in this scenario. With the dollar's value now at zero, there is little chance that the US can call on other countries for a loan to bail them out. While a negotiation of some kind might be reached, we're still only a few hours into this financial fiasco. Even someone in a position of institutional executive power like Governor Jed is pretty much helpless to solve the problem at hand. All he can do is read through the statement prepared by his team before he's rushed off to a press conference where he can assure everyone that everything will be fine, all while knowing full well things are only going to get worse. Hour 12. Some of the initial rioting and looting has died down, but there are still pockets of discontented people dispersed throughout the entire US. In order to regain control of the population, martial law comes into effect. The government hands down orders to state representatives like Governor Jed to mandate curfews on citizens, restricting everyone's movement. The initial focus isn't just on fixing the economy, but also maintaining order and preventing civil unrest before American society tears itself apart. Earlier in the day, some retailers, like the one Jeff works for, issued a statement advising their employees to stay home and avoid coming to work. Businesses all across the country grind to an unexpected halt. After all, how can they afford to have anyone come into work if they're being paid a valueless currency? But for average workers like Jeff, it's hardly comforting being given this extra time off. There's worries over how they'll pay their bills and rent, and all that anyone will officially say is that nobody should panic and they're trying to solve the problem. Not even a full day into this crisis, and the economy is already in a wreck. The decline in the dollar's value has already had catastrophic consequences on the entire economy. The United States is quickly becoming reminiscent of 1920s Germany, which was drowning in debt following the First World War. In an attempt to pay off its debt, most of which was reparations to other countries, the German government came up with what seemed like a perfect solution: just print more money. But this caused the value of the German mark to collapse, much like in this scenario with the dollar. In fact, a similar drop in the dollar's value was seen during the pandemic, where the US government attempted to boost the economy by printing more money. Back in Germany, this led to average citizens hauling wheelbarrows full of money just to buy a loaf of bread. It's not dissimilar from what's now facing the citizens of the US after the collapse of their dollar. Before, anyone could just head to the supermarket, grab a gallon of milk, tap their debit card or Apple Pay, and be automatically charged for the goods. But now the businesses that have kept their cashiers working don't even know if they can accept dollars anymore. Most consumers are scrambling to offer whatever they have on hand in order to trade for canned food, batteries, bottles of water, desperately trying to make sure they have the basic essentials handy. If Jeff had been brave enough to show up to work, he would have immediately heard a difference in the store. The registers aren't beeping. Instead, the sounds of arguing customers, haggling, or even verbally abusing employees has drowned out all other noise. Hardly a new phenomenon, but this time it is different. This affects everyone. The same effects are felt at gas stations, with queues stretching down multiple streets to fill up their cars. But with a currency that's collapsing, how do you even price a commodity like gasoline? Ordinary people spend the first half of the day in a blind panic, realizing that their credit cards, all of the change in their wallets, have all just become useless objects. Hour 48. With every passing day, every aspect of modern life seems to be rapidly unraveling. All the recognizable structures and transactions that make up American society can't be conducted. Employers can't pay their workers the wages they're owed, and in turn, those ordinary working people can't afford to pay their bills. Meanwhile, the likes of Governor Jed are still none the wiser as to how to proceed. With no way of paying them, there's been little hope of mobilizing the state's various police departments to maintain law and order. The majority of those who are willing to work pro bono are a little too excited about a potentially lawless state, making their response to both opportunistic looters and peaceful protesters similarly overzealous. The actions of those who have injured innocent people have been condemned by Governor Jed, but as ever, there are some staunch, vocal voices that want to praise such violent reactions to an unprecedented situation. Naturally, Jed can't please everyone. In a time of crisis like this, all eyes are turning to the local and federal government for answers. The people above the state governor, like Congress and the Senate, have spent the past 2 days scrambling to retake control. But how are they supposed to fix this? The regular folks who still had TVs watched the president make an address, standing at a podium in front of a hastily thrown-together press conference with U.S. flags in the background. The president and their economic advisors all assured the people that they were doing everything in their power to stabilize the situation, whatever that means. Throughout the early hours of the crisis, emergency measures were being discussed, but naturally there was little other countries could do to bail the U.S. out of the situation straight away. The decline in the dollar's value didn't just mean the average American's money was worthless, but it also prevented the U.S. from borrowing money from other nations. After all, how are they going to pay back a massive loan to another country and their taxpayers if the currency remains valueless? But while the economic consequences were bad enough, the lasting damage of the dollar crashing would also be felt in more ways than just financial. A fiasco like this really isn't a good look for the US, and the decline of the dollar could end up weakening their influence on the world stage. It would also give other countries cause to lose faith in the American government to handle themselves. With the dollar no longer holding value, it's not likely to stay the world's reserve currency, if it had even held on to that status at this point. Back during their economic crisis, Venezuela's bolivar had devalued to the point where it was worth less than toilet paper. A weak dollar could mean the same for the U.S. economy. Given the far-reaching consequences, other nations might step in hoping to stabilize the situation and help restore the dollar's value. But this uncertainty could just as easily push them in the opposite direction. Faced with potential economic fallout, countries might choose isolation over cooperation, pulling back on trade not only with the U.S. but with each other. The result would be a fractured global economy. While international help is unlikely, the U.S. government's response isn't going to be one that favors its citizens either. Back in the 1930s, during the Great Depression, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, making it illegal for private U.S. citizens to own gold. The government needed every ounce of gold they could get their hands on in order to stabilize the value of the dollar. Jerry is worried that it is entirely possible the present US government might try to seize some similar tangible asset like gold or silver, anything that its citizens have been holding on to, in the event of a financial meltdown exactly like this. They'd also likely freeze all bank accounts in order to prevent people from making mass withdrawals. Alternatively, the government might be looking at introducing price controls to prevent grocery stores and other businesses from price gouging. But despite all the uncertainty, the average person knows they'll have to adapt to survive. And after all, the dollar crashing has acted as a mass equalizer. Everyone is in the same boat now. It's possible that in order to get by, citizens like Jeff might revert back to age-old methods like bartering in order to exchange goods. Neighbors with a surplus of firewood might trade that for canned food, so that those with more cans are able to heat their homes. Same could start to apply for services too. Builders and other tradesmen could help repair any damage to someone else's house in exchange for water. It seems archaic using a system like this, maybe even idealist to expect some people to get along well enough for bartering to become a viable system. But in a world where the dollar crashed overnight, it would become the most reliable way to survive. At the very least, people would be able to make it through the day by trading goods and services, at least until the dollar regains its value. If it ever does. If things really go south, don't panic. Watch What a Dollar Gets You Around the World and see just how far your last buck goes.